Hey guys, we are back this week, closer than ever on the Subaru, about ready to fire this thing up. But before we get to do that, there's a few more things that we need to do. Today we're actually going to work on bleeding the brakes, doing a final nut and bolt check, installing the rear mud flaps, and getting this car just much closer to getting it ready to fire up. This is what we're working with today. So since we are very close to the end, I do have some blue painter's tape and a Sharpie. What I'm going to do with that is basically label out all the small little projects that we have left, put it on the windshield so I can cross those off as we get much closer. The issue, I wouldn't say issue, but inevitably with all builds, the last 10% or so takes the longest, and I don't want to chance anything on something that I may have forgotten, so I'm going to try to make a list, put that on the windshield, and keep us straight. Oh, I also did get our new serpentine belt. So keep in mind that we do not have the power steering pump anymore. So this is just going to be wrapped around the alternator and the crank pulley. So this is pretty much the smallest one that I could find in the 5 rib. So we're going to see if we can get this to work. There is one more slightly smaller one, but it's literally like twice as expensive, I assume, because not very many vehicles use them. So we're just going to see if we can try to get away with this. For our brake job, we do have the OMT hydraulic brake and clutch pressure bleeder. So this basically is an adapter that goes on top of the brake master, and you pump this up with well, first we're going to pump it up with nothing in there. We're going to leak test it, make sure no air drops as far as the pressure goes, so we have a tight, clean system. And then once that's done, we'll drain what we have in there for hydraulic fluid, and then put some new stuff in here. So I think I have a quart. All right, so yes, I do have a liter of liquid moly brake fluid, .4, so we'll be using that inside of this, and then we'll basically bleed all 4 corners. Subaru has a specific sequence on which corner you want to go to, so I will show you guys that later on. And then we've got this little can here that kind of hooks onto the bleeder valve on the calipers, and it catches all that excess fluid. So that's what we're going to be using for our brake flush. We are going to get the rear mud flaps installed. I already got the front ones on, just haven't had the time or the chance to do the rear ones. And then while we're doing that, this is from Permatex. It's called Bolt Mark. So we're going to torque everything down. This is orange paste. It's a tamper-proof kind of paint. So basically what you do is you put this on the bolt and the mating surface where the bolt is, and that way you know if it's been torqued or tampered with. If it ever breaks loose, you'll see that on the witness marks. So we're going to use this on all of our bolts to make sure everything's final tightened and torqued, so we don't have to worry about anything coming loose. And then at the very end, I've got a little surprise for you guys. I was able to pick this up from a local guy, and we're going to get that installed in the car, see how that looks, and see if that's the direction we want to go. But stay tuned to the end. I'll share that detail with you guys later. So engine bay is pretty much all wrapped up. The only minor things that I need to do, I've got some new bolts coming for the intake manifold. These ones are a touch too long. These are 35mm, just need to go down to 30mm, so it should be good there. I got all the piping reinstalled. I've got all of the, let's actually start with this, boost solenoid. So we've got the Mac 4-port boost solenoid, got it all wired in electronically to the DTM 12 pin there, and then we've got the push to connect vacuum ports, or vacuum lines. So we've got the 2 on the left, they go right over to the wastegate, and I did put some more of the Insultherm on here, 1/4 inch, just to protect the plastic or Teflon lines. Not sure what they're actually made of, but give it some additional heat protection. So we've got the 2 running to the wastegate, and then we've got the one on this side below the vent, plumbed under and over to the turbo. So we've got that to a 90 as well. Very happy with how that came out. Everything fits perfect, and the lines are very short and clean. So really like how that came out. Moving on to the power wires. So we've got the alternator all plumbed up, got 0 gauge running, zip tied, and right over here to the battery post. I've got 2 grounds. I've got one for the chassis that hooks to the shock tower as normal, and I've got this one that goes underneath, very well hidden, but it goes right to the block. So we've got a block ground there, and then we've got the 2 power wires that go to the trunk for the amp. Got to get this made out of metal. That's one of the last things that I have to do. This is where the alternator goes, and then obviously the 2 fuses for the rear. Get that all buttoned up, so that'll be good. This wire here goes right to the starter. So we've got the ground, like we mentioned, right there. But then we've got the starter wire underneath. You can see the red boot that I put on there. Got that nice and protected. So that'll take care of all of that. What else do I have? Oh, got the oil feed line all plumbed in, tightened up, so that's good. Got the O2 all wired up, welded into the bung. I showed you guys a nightmare on that. I basically left the bolt in there while finished welding it and fused the bolt to the bung. Not a good idea. But we got that taken care of. Everything's good to go there. Got the intake on. Oh, we got the catch can all plumbed up. So we've got this giant tube ran on to the underside of the vehicle. I'll show you guys that once I get down there. I did vent evap hose so we don't have fuel smell up here under the engine bay. We did get that back pressure sensor and canister all plumbed up. Looks all nice. Got some gaps in here so we won't have any rattling, and it's plumbed away from the splash shield so we shouldn't have any melting issues. So all the piping is good, all bolted up. Again, the only things we have left is the battery. I don't even know what to call this. I guess plate that I'm creating, and the bolts. And I just got to weld one bracket to the wastegate tube, but I'll show you that underneath the car. So let's hop underneath and I'll give you guys a tour on that. Oh, we also got the wiring all done. All nice and clean, just like factory. And we've got it going right down to the factory transmission. I think that's six pin plug. So got away from the I-wire adapter. We don't really need that since we're not running the rear O2. I'm going to repurpose the 2 wires on that for the I-wire setup, and then just feed that 12 volts, and we should be good for the DC-CD control. Yeah, everything came really good. So let's hop underneath and we'll give you guys a look on what that looks like. All right, so moving underneath, we've got a new braided ground on each head, bolted to the chassis or to the frame rails. So we've got those taken care of. That's what the back pressure line looks like. Again, we should have no issues with melting on that. All the EGTs are done. Should be good to go there. And then for those lines, I basically ran it. This is that IAG line. All zip tied away from everything, following the fuel lines, and then it's going to spill out right there, so we're good. And then the small line on top is for that evap, so we should be able to get rid of that fuel smell that would come if we left it open in the engine bay. Everything looks really nice and tidy, away from the steering knuckles, so we don't have any rubbing issues there. Yeah, everything came out really nice here. Got the exhaust all finished up. So we've got the plug in there. We got everything all tightened up and installed. Everything is good. This is the only part that's missing, is a little bracket that's going to be mounted to that hole right there. It's going to just be a little L bracket right to the wastegate, so that way it keeps it nice and firm and away from everything and it doesn't rattle. So that's it for underneath here. Very excited. Alright, so before we get into this too far, let's go ahead and start marking up what we have for projects. Alright, so we've got all the tape up on the windshield. This is what I've got so far. Coolant overflow, fill coolant, fuel regulator, vacuum hose, brake flush, mud flaps, serpentine belt, bolt check, engine oil, trans oil, diff oil, flush the gas out of it, base map, axle nut, torquing, passenger PCV hose. I'll show you guys what I mean by that. OEM cluster, gotta install that, tidy up the ECU wires, install the steering wheel, set the fuel pressure, assemble the front end, which is the headlights and the bumper, and then last but not least, the alignment. So passenger PCV hose, one thing that I noticed is the catch can is very close to the top, so we got to address that. Not a huge deal. What I'm going to do is take this hose right here and shorten it up, so that way instead of going straight down, you can see it's very close to the map sensor. I'm just going to make this more of a 45, so it's coming down this way, and it's going to bypass that altogether. And then I can put maybe 1/4-inch spacers between the mounting bracket and the catch can, so it'll move the can out just a little bit. It doesn't touch. I can kind of get my finger around this, not exactly. But what I'm worried about is with the hood, if it kind of flexes at all at high speeds, I really don't want it rubbing on the top of the can. So just gonna space this out, give me a little bit more breather room, and we should be okay. All right, so first things first, we gotta get the car jacked up. We'll put them on the jack stands. That way we can get the wheels removed and get all the brake stuff ready to, or prepared to start the bleeding process. So let's get this up on the jack stands and we'll take it from there. So the idea with jack placement is I am putting them directly underneath the strip or the coilovers, so that way it kind of jacks the wheels up into normal riding height. The reason why you want to do that is when you start to go tighten all these bolts, you want this basically riding at ride height, so that way it doesn't overstretch or put unneeded tension on the bushings themselves. Now this is not exactly at ride height, just because the jack stands are a little bit towards the center and not on the total outside. But it'll get us close enough. All right, before we get started, I am gonna clean this up just a little bit and then begin to pressurize this just to check to see if we have any leaks. So just kind of wipe down the reservoir. Open this up. There is a screen in here, so you want to take that out. Go ahead and put the adapter on top. Make sure, yeah, we're good. And I'm gonna put a fresh rag here, just so I don't have any issues. And then we basically pump this up. Let's do 1 bar, which is about 14 PSI. And then we basically just leave it here to see if it leaks. All right, so it's been a little over 5 minutes or so, and this has not moved, so we are good to go. So we're gonna release the pressure on here. You wanna make sure you release the pressure from here and not here, because this will cause the brake fluid to just go everywhere. So we are good. Actually, you know what? Let's pressurize this back so I can get all this old fluid out. We'll just drain it out of one of the wheels. All right, so for these STI Brembos, they do have 2 different bleeder ports. You want to start with the innermost one first and then move out to the outside. Since we're just kind of pushing the fluid out, this is actually the wheel that you are supposed to start with, the right front. So we'll pop the covers off, we'll put the catch can basically on there, loosen it up, and kind of push all the old brake fluid out. So we'll kind of let it do its thing. See how the air bubbles coming out? That's less than ideal. That's partially the reason why we're bleeding this. I did swap all of the lines, brake lines, and I did not bleed it when I did that. I was kind of saving it for last. So doing a whole brake flush, and we'll get this where it needs to be. All right, so you'll notice that the rear part of the reservoir is empty, but the front part still has a little bit in there. I believe that's from the rear, so we're gonna go ahead and bleed one of the rears and try to get that out of there as well. So the next wheel in the sequence is actually the left rear. So they do it in cross patterns. So I'm trying to get rid of that little bit of extra fluid that's left in the reservoir. So go ahead and break this free, let that bleed out as well. So that did not go according to plan. I am going to have to vacuum out that little bit of fluid that's in there. Unfortunately, what you heard was injecting air into the lines. So this is going to take a really good bleed, unfortunately. I thought this would be the frontmost portion of the brake fluid. That's not the case. So we'll hop back to the front right, and then I will vacuum out the leftover fluid that's in the reservoir, and we'll have to do a really good bleed on this. All right, so I vacuumed out as much as I could with my little mighty vac. We'll go ahead and put the cover back on. Good there. We'll pop this back on. And then we'll open the cover and we'll dump some brake fluid in here. I have a feeling this is going to take a lot, so we're going to put a good amount in here. Now, one little trick that I do is I usually poke just a small hole here for pouring and then a breather hole here. This allows you to top off the reservoir without really spilling anything. So we're going to pump this up probably to 2 bar or maybe 25 pounds. And we'll do 20 pounds. Good enough. All right, so reservoir is full. You can see that. So we're good there. Let's go ahead and start bleeding the front right. All right, so we'll let it hang from here. Put the piece on, and then we'll break it free. And we'll just basically let it bleed like that for a little bit until we get some steady flow. Starting to look halfway decent now. All right, so we're good there. You can see there's no bubbles, so we'll cap this off. So the inner one is good. We'll move to the outer. Let me take a rag and wipe the inside fitting off. That one's good. We'll break this one free. Looks decent, but we'll give it a little bit of time. Yeah, that looks pretty good. So we'll cap that off. There we go. So this one's bled. What I will do, just to make it a little clean, is spray these off with brake clean. You really don't want any brake fluid anywhere because it's super corrosive. All right, so just a little bit of squirt, and we should be good. All right, so this wheel's done. Let's go ahead and move back to the rear right. All right, and you can see the pressure bleeder is out of fluid and the reservoir has dropped just a little bit. So we'll go ahead and put some more fluid in there before we start in the rear, and we'll keep this going. All right, so we will start with the inner one again. And we'll go until we see good flow, which is not yet. Now we're starting to get decent flow. So we'll wait for these bubbles to stop. And go check the front really quick. Still full. See a few more bubbles trickling out, so we'll give this a little bit more. Now it's starting to look good. See there's no bubbles? We'll close that off and move to the outside. See how clean this fluid looks? A little bit of bubbles right there, so we'll give it some time. Get this a little bit more. So I'm gonna go check the front. This is getting pretty full, so we're gonna wanna dump this out. And then we'll pick up from there. All right, so I got this emptied out. Let's go ahead and finish up this. We should be good. That looks pretty good. So we'll cap it off. All right, we'll give this a spray. white. All right, this one's good. Move on to the next wheel. All right, so next wheel is driver front. All right, one last wheel. Okay. All right, so brakes are done. Let's go ahead and move towards the mud flaps, and then we'll get the final bolt check and everything wrapped up on that. All right, so we got the pump off of the reservoir. You can see it's basically at this line, which is decent. Last thing to do is go inside, pump the brakes, make sure everything's good, and then top off the reservoir. All right, so for the rear mud flaps, this is a hatch, so it's a little bit different. We've got this inner splash shield. Essentially what you will be doing is mounting these two. I am going with a more secure method, which is drilling and then putting a screw through the body. But before I do that, I do want to remove the splash shield so I can make sure I get the hole exactly where I need it, and then reinstall the splash shield and then drill it from the rear side. So I go basically through this and through the metal. So I'll go ahead and pull this first. We'll get this mocked up and we'll drill it, and then we'll reinstall everything. For the splash shield, it's just a few Phillips head plastic clips, so we'll get those removed. So I'm not going to pull the whole thing, just going to pop this down. And that'll give me enough to sneak in there and make sure I get a good marking. So we'll go ahead and pop these clips on here. Don't need to remove anything, it's all pretty much good to go. Okay. Get your little screw clips. And the inner portions use a little spacer like this. So through this deal. You are going through the top hole. I forgot to have these transfer punches, and that'll work perfect because I can size it up so it goes basically right through here with little to no movement, and we'll get it perfect. So let's do that. Something like this. There we go. That's perfect. All right. So now, screw through the spacer or the washer, put the spacer in the back. Actually, you know what? I got to put this back in first. Okay. Okay, and then we'll drill it from the back. And then we'll do the final installation. These are the regular bolts that they come with. I've got some self-tappers that are just a bit longer. Battery's dead. There we go. It is poking out pretty good, so I think we'll be okay. There we go. So we'll move on to the other side and we should be good to go. Same idea. All right, so we did get both sets of mud flaps installed, and they did come out really nice. Came out great the first try, no issues. So we'll move on to the next project. All right, so we're gonna start off torquing the axle nuts. So the front is 162 foot-pounds. Okay, and the rear is 140. All right, so for the final nut and bolt check, I've got all the axle nuts torqued. I gotta pinch those in with a punch. But let's go ahead and start with the driver front side. Get everything torqued down, marked, and then we'll swap over to the passenger side, do the same thing, and then move to the rear. All right, so taking you down under, you can see all the orange dots. I've got pretty much everything torqued. All the steering rack, subframe, motor mounts, pretty much everything. Sway bar end links, knuckle. The only thing I didn't do is the castle nuts that have the cotter pins. Those are pretty self-explanatory. And I did not tighten this part yet because I still got to do the adjustment for caster. But you can see I've got pretty much everything else done. Even the strut tower, big bolts, they're pretty much good to go. Let's go ahead and move on to the transmission mounts. Oh, I even got the control arm back here all marked out. So we'll go ahead and move over to these transmission mount bolts, get those all torqued down and marked, and we'll be good for the front. All right, so we got all the transmission bolts torqued down, marked out. So these are good to go. Now we can move on to the rear suspension. All right, and we got the rear all diff done. And I've got the rear lower control arms, pretty much everything torqued down and marked. And I even got the exhaust all tightened up. So we are good to go for all the torque stuff. All right, so the next part, getting the serpentine belt installed. The pulley that's on the alternator is a 6 rib, even though the factory crank pulley, I'm not using factory, but I'm using the ATI dampener, is 5 rib, so it'll still work fine. Oh, so this actually might be a little on the shorter side, so that's good. Let's see if we can get this to work though. If not, I'll have to get the next longer belt, which actually is a crisis averted because this is near the shortest one that you could get. Yeah, we're good. Quick and easy. All right, guys, we got a lot of progress made today. We got all the bolts torqued down and marked. We got the serpentine belt on. We did a full brake flush. Torqued down all the axle nuts and got those staked. I think we did quite a bit today. So let's go ahead and pull some of these off the list. All right, so still got the coolant overflow to do. We haven't filled it. Vacuum. We did the brake flush, so let's go ahead and pull that one off. We did the mud flaps, got that on. Got the serpentine belt on, that turned out well. Did the bolt check, we're good there. Axle nuts, we're good there. And that's pretty much it for now. So I know I told you guys I had a surprise, kept it for the very end. Let's take a look, see what it is. A set of factory STI wheels. I think these are going to fit better with a different offset. This will actually move the wheels inwards a little bit more, so I'll be able to run a meatier tire. They're dirty. I'm thinking about getting them powder coated. Not sure if I want to keep the factory color or maybe do the BBS gold, kind of like the RPF ones that I had before. So the issue with the suspension, keep in mind this is a narrow body. And this is the STI knuckles, so they kind of already space it out just enough so that way the offsets are a little bit different. So I did have the RPF ones on here, which from what I understand fits the wide body STIs perfectly, but because this is narrow body, The offset does push them out just a little bit too much, and I don't want to have any rubbing issues. Quite honestly, I'm a big believer of OEM Plus. I don't want to have anything super cambered out. Stance, I'm not really into that anymore. I want more of a meaty tire, especially with the amount of power that we're trying to run on here. So let me go ahead and get those factory wheels thrown on here. I think it's going to fit hopefully better. I think the offset's like 58, and the RPF ones that I had are 40, I believe. So let's throw them on here, see what they look like. Look at that. That just fits nice. There's no poke. I can run a little bit meatier of a tire and we're good to go. Yeah, that was definitely the good call. So what do you guys think? Got the new STI wheels on. This is from this year body, just the wide body STI. Has a little bit more friendly of an offset, so it kind of goes in more of a positive offset. That way I can run a bigger tire. The rear does poke out just a smidge, and I've already rolled them, so I think when I'm on the ground and the suspension begins to articulate, it'll kind of bring the top of the wheels or tires inwards, so I shouldn't have any issues. Do have 245 40 18s on this right now. I'm considering going up to 255 square. Give me a little bit wider of a tire. I think the RPF ones have 235s. Yeah, the RPF ones were 235s, so obviously smaller than 245s. I can go a little bit bigger on these ones. Got the RPF ones in the Michelin all seasons when the original goal was to just get the car up and running at maybe 400 horsepower as my daily. Obviously, things have changed and escalated, so going for at least double that power, so the Michelins are not going to cut it. So gonna go with a wider tire on these. Still undecided on what color to powder coat them. I do like the looks of the factory color, but I don't know. I also like the gold on the RPF ones, and then matches the front intercooler. So what do you guys think? What colors would you suggest? Keep it the factory color, which is like a, I don't even know, a gunmetal-ish style. Go with gold, or a completely different color altogether. Let me know in the comments what you guys think we should do.